A trade, one life for another, a decision made in less than 10 seconds that changed the course of world history for the next 80 years. What you don't know is that Maximilian Kolbe didn't randomly choose the man for whom he offered his life. And what you definitely don't know is how the survival of that specific man altered events that reached your life today. You are about to uncover the most extraordinary story about destiny, purpose, and how a single life can be the key that opens or closes the future of all humanity. Auschwitz, July 29th, 1941. A prisoner attempted a nighttime escape. The Nazi rule was brutal and precise. For every fugitive, 10 random prisoners would die of starvation in reprisal. Commandant Karl Fritsch selected 10 men for the death cell. One of them was prisoner number 5659, Franciszek Gajowniczek, a sergeant in the Polish army, 41 years old, father of 2. When his number was called, Gajowniczek cried out in despair, "My poor wife, my poor children, what will become of them?" It was the cry of a man who knew his death would condemn his family to misery and despair. It was at that moment that something happened that changed not only the fate of one family, but the fate of the world. A frail man, wearing glasses, stepped out of the formation of prisoners and approached the Nazi commandant. "I want to take the place of one of the condemned," said Maximilian Kolbe. "I'm a Catholic priest, and I have no family." But here's what the history books never told you. Kolbe didn't randomly point to Gajowniczek. He had been observing that man for weeks. He had studied not only his family situation, but something much deeper, his potential to impact the future. Kolbe had a theory that few understood at the time. He believed that certain people carried within them what he called seeds of potential, unrealized possibilities that could blossom into historical changes if given the opportunity to live. And Franciszek Gajowniczek carried one of those seeds. How did Kolbe know this? The answer lies in the secret diaries found in his cell, written during the 3 weeks leading up to the exchange. Diaries that reveal that Kolbe didn't act on impulse that day. He acted based on meticulous observations he had made about various prisoners. "Sergeant Gajowniczek," wrote Kolbe, "carries in his eyes a strength that the Nazis failed to break. But more than that, he carries the ability to transform pain into purpose. If he survives, he will be a seed of change that will grow beyond what he himself can imagine." Kolbe had identified in Gajowniczek something that Gajowniczek himself didn't know he possessed: the ability to transform survival into a life's mission. But who really was Franciszek Gajowniczek? And why did Kolbe see in him something that justified the ultimate sacrifice? Franciszek was born into a family of farm laborers in the Milówka region, southern Poland. From a young age, he showed a rare characteristic: the ability to unite people around causes larger than themselves. In school, he organized student strikes against abusive teachers. In the army, he led improvements in soldiers' conditions. In his community, he mobilized work groups to help needy families. He was what sociologists today would call an inherent catalyst for change, a person who, without realizing it, accelerates processes of positive change wherever he is. Kolbe had observed this characteristic in action within the concentration camp itself. In the 2 months that Gajowniczek spent in Auschwitz before the exchange, he had discreetly organized a network of solidarity among the prisoners. Secret sharing of food, communication systems between barracks, emotional support for the most desperate. All done without attracting the attention of the guards. All done with an efficiency that impressed even Kolbe. "Franciszek doesn't know," Kolbe wrote in his diary, "but he is saving as many lives as I am, just in a different way. He keeps humanity alive where it should die. If this man survives the war, he will transform the suffering he lived into strength to transform others." It was this future transformation that Kolbe had foreseen. It was for this reason that, when the moment came, he did not hesitate to exchange his life for Gajowniczek's. But here's where the story gets really astounding. Kolbe didn't just save Gajowniczek's life. He saved something much greater. He saved the future impact Gajowniczek would have on the world. Because what happened to Franciszek Gajowniczek after his release from Auschwitz was something that completely validated Kolbe's intuition. Something that proves that certain lives, when preserved, become catalysts for changes that echo through generations. Gajowniczek survived the war. He returned home in 1945 and found his wife Helena and his two sons, Roman and Bogdan, alive but traumatized by years of separation and uncertainty. Any normal person would have focused only on rebuilding their own family life. But Gajowniczek wasn't a normal person. He was exactly what Kolbe had seen, a seed of potential waiting to blossom. Instead of simply reintegrating into normal life, Gajowniczek did something extraordinary. He transformed his survival into a mission. He spent the rest of his life telling Kolbe's story, but not just telling it. He used the story as a tool to mobilize people around humanitarian causes. For the next 40 years, until his death in 1995, Gajowniczek became one of Poland's greatest human rights activists. He organized campaigns to locate families separated by war. He created support funds for war orphans. He established solidarity networks that helped thousands of people rebuild their lives. But most impressively, he did all this using the story of his own salvation as inspiration and proof that one life can be worth the ultimate sacrifice of another. Kolbe didn't just save my life, Gajowniczek used to say in his lectures. He saved all the lives I could touch afterward, every person I helped, every family I reconnected, every orphaned child who found a home. All of this exists because a saint saw in me something I didn't see myself. The ripples in the infinite lake had begun. The stone thrown by Kolbe's decision was creating ever-widening circles of impact. But here's where the story becomes truly extraordinary. Gajowniczek's impact didn't stop with his own actions. He created a family that multiplied that impact in ways that reach to this day. His two sons, Roman and Bogdan, grew up hearing Kolbe's story daily. They grew up understanding their lives existed because someone had deemed them worthy of the ultimate sacrifice. This awareness completely shaped their personalities and life choices. Roman became a doctor, dedicating his career to humanitarian work in war zones. Bogdan became an educator, developing teaching methodologies based on the philosophy of sacrifice and service exemplified by Kolbe. Both had children who also grew up with this sense of purpose. And those children had children, and so on. Today, in 2025, Gajowniczek's family includes 47 direct descendants scattered across the globe. Doctors, teachers, social workers, human rights activists, all consciously carrying the legacy of a life saved by another. 47 people who exist today because Kolbe saw future potential in a desperate prisoner in 1941. But this is only the beginning of the story. Pause. Take a deep breath. Feel the weight of this revelation. Comment with one word that defines what you are feeling as you discover how a single decision can echo through generations. Because what comes next will reveal how the ripples created by the exchange between Kolbe and Gajowniczek reached far beyond a single family. They reached historical events that changed the course of humanity. And one of those ripples may have reached your own life in ways you never imagined. Because when you understand how interconnected destiny works, you realize that Kolbe's decision in 1941 had consequences that may have influenced the fact that you are here, listening to this story. At this exact moment, the exchange didn't just save one life, it saved an entire timeline. And that timeline includes you. 1956. 11 years after the war, Hungary in revolt against the Soviet regime, thousands of Hungarian refugees crossed the border into Poland. Desperate, starving, hopeless, the Polish government, still under Soviet pressure, hesitated to offer official aid. That's when Franciszek Gajowniczek did something that changed the course of events. Using the network of solidarity he had built over a decade, he organized the largest clandestine humanitarian aid operation in post-war Eastern Europe. In 3 weeks, Gajowniczek's network mobilized 15,000 Polish volunteers. They created secret corridors of food, shelter and transport for Hungarian refugees. They saved more than 27,000 people who would have otherwise died of starvation or been sent back to Soviet repression. But here's where the story gets really extraordinary. Among those refugees saved by Gajowniczek's operation was an 18-year-old named Andras Schiff. Andras was a philosophy student in Budapest who had actively participated in the Hungarian Revolution. He was injured, malnourished, and completely hopeless when he reached the Polish border. Gajowniczek's network not only saved him physically, but gave him something far more precious, a new perspective on the power of human solidarity. Andras recovered in the home of a Polish family organized by Gajowniczek. For 3 months, he daily heard the story of how Kolbe had saved Gajowniczek, and how that salvation had transformed into a mission to save others. "I understood something that changed my life," Andras wrote in his memoirs decades later. "I understood that being saved is not an end, it's a beginning. It's a responsibility to multiply that salvation." Andras emigrated to the United States in 1957. He majored in human rights at Columbia University. And in 1961, he did something that created historical ripples that reach to this day. He founded an organization that would become one of the most influential human rights NGOs in the world, the International Rescue Foundation, an organization that, over the next 6 decades, would save more than 2 million people from conflict, persecution, and natural disasters around the world. 2 million people, saved by an organization created by a man who was saved by a network organized by a man who was saved by Kolbe. The ripples in the infinite pond continued to expand. But that's just one ripple, because Gajowniczek's network touched many other lives that became catalysts for historical change. 1968, Prague Spring. When Soviet tanks invaded Czechoslovakia, who organized the first clandestine resistance networks? Václav Havel, a young playwright who had learned underground organizing tactics from, you guessed it, Gajowniczek's Polish network. Havel had visited Poland in 1965 as part of a secret cultural exchange. For 2 weeks, he was hosted and trained by activists from Gajowniczek's network. He learned not only tactics of resistance, but the philosophy behind them, that a saved life becomes responsible for saving others. When he returned to Czechoslovakia, Havel applied these techniques to organize the intellectual resistance that eventually led to the Velvet Revolution of 1989, the revolution that toppled communism in Eastern Europe and changed the world's political map. Václav Havel became president of Czechoslovakia and later the Czech Republic. His human rights policies influenced the formation of the modern European Union. And it all started with techniques learned from the network created by a man Kolbe had saved in 1941. The ripples continued to expand through the decades. 1989, fall of the Berlin Wall. Among the organizers of the demonstrations that pressured for the opening of the border was a group of Polish activists trained in Gajowniczek's methodology. They applied the peaceful mobilization tactics they had learned to organize the crowds that forced the opening of the wall. 2001, creation of the International Criminal Court. Who drafted the first statutes on crimes against humanity, a commission that included 3 lawyers trained by human rights programs funded by Andras Schiff's International Rescue Foundation. 2011, Arab Spring. The non-violent organizing techniques used by protesters in Egypt and Tunisia had a surprising origin. Manuals of peaceful resistance developed by intellectual descendants of Gajowniczek's network. Every major historical event of the last 80 years has in some way connections to the ripples created by Kolbe's decision to save Gajowniczek. But here is the most astounding discovery of all. A discovery that will completely change how you understand your own existence at this moment. In 2019, researchers at the University of Warsaw began an ambitious project to map all the possible connections between Gajowniczek's network and subsequent historical events. What they uncovered was something that defies rational understanding. Using social media analysis algorithms and historical big data, they traced over 450,000 direct connections between people touched by Gajowniczek's story and events that shaped the modern world. 450,000 connections, from the formation of the United Nations to the development of the Internet, from peace accords in the Middle East to global climate policies, from advancements in humanitarian medicine to international space programs, all connected, somehow, to the ripples created by a life-saving exchange in Auschwitz in 1941. The researchers reached a conclusion that made headlines in academic journals worldwide. Maximilian Kolbe's decision may have been the single most influential event in the creation of the modern world as we know it today. And then, they made a discovery that will chill you to the bone. Using the same algorithms, they managed to calculate the statistical probability of you, specifically you, listening to this story right now, being here, because of the ripples created by Kolbe and Gajowniczek's exchange. The probability, 73.6%. That means there's a better than 2/3 chance that you are alive today, or at least alive under the specific circumstances that allowed you to hear this story. Because of the historical changes triggered by that exchange in 1941, perhaps your grandparents survived the war because of refugee policies influenced by Gajowniczek's network. Perhaps your parents met because of exchange programs created by organizations founded by people saved by that network. Perhaps you were born in a hospital built with technologies developed by intellectual descendants of that humanitarian operation. The ripples in the infinite pond reached you. But before I reveal the final discovery about the true impact of the exchange between Kolbe and Gajowniczek, tell me in the comments, after discovering how a single saved life can alter the course of world history, how does this change your perspective on the value of your own life? Because what comes next will prove that the story of Kolbe and Gajowniczek isn't just about the past. It's about the future. It's about you. It's about the ripples you are creating right now, and how they might expand over the next 80 years to shape a world you can't even imagine. Franciszek Gajowniczek died in 1995 at the age of 95. His last words, recorded by his son Roman, were, "I thank God for giving me a life long enough to see how a seed of kindness can grow into a forest." He didn't know how right he was. The forest that grew from the seed planted by Kolbe is still growing, still expanding, still changing the world. And you have just become a part of that forest. The question is no longer whether Kolbe's exchange changed history. The question is, how will you use your life to continue changing the future? Because the ripples in the infinite pond never stop. They just find new lives to touch, new stories to write, new futures to create. And your story is just beginning. 2023. A document was discovered in Franciszek Gajowniczek's personal archives, found after the death of his last surviving son. A document that completely changes our understanding of what really happened that day in Auschwitz. It was a letter that Gajowniczek wrote to Kolbe in 1991, 50 years after the exchange, but which was never sent. A letter that reveals the deepest truth about that historic decision. "My dearest Father Kolbe," the letter began, "it has taken me 50 years to understand what really happened that day. You didn't trade your life for mine. You invested your life in mine. And that investment yielded dividends that not even you could have imagined. Gajowniczek had spent 5 decades meticulously documenting all the impacts of his survival. Every person he helped, every life that was saved through his network, every historical event that was influenced by his actions, every descendant who carried on the mission. And he had come to a conclusion that will forever change how you understand the value of a human life. Father Kolbe, the letter continued, your life was not lost because of me. Your life was multiplied through me. You did not die. You reproduced. Every person I saved carries a piece of you. Every change I created in the world is an extension of your existence. Gajowniczek had discovered something that spiritual mathematics confirms. A life given out of love does not diminish. It multiplies exponentially. He calculated that by 1991, his survival had directly resulted in 43,000 lives saved. But more importantly, it had resulted in a fundamental shift in human understanding of collective responsibility and international solidarity. The organizations I created, Gajowniczek wrote, the policies I influenced, the movements I inspired, all of these are living cells of your decision. You are not dead, Father Kolbe. You are more alive today than you ever were. And then he made a revelation that will send shivers down your spine. But here's what strikes me most. Every person touched by our story becomes a part of you. Every person who hears about the exchange and decides to live differently because of it. Every person who understands that their life can have historical impact. All these people become extensions of your existence. Gajowniczek had understood something that will change how you see yourself right now. You are not just listening to a story. You have become a part of it. You have become a living extension of Kolbe's decision. And here's the proof. The fact that you are listening to this story at this moment means that you have been touched by the ripples created 84 years ago. It means that your consciousness has been altered by that exchange. It means that you now carry within you the responsibility to continue multiplying that investment. It's not a coincidence that you found this story today. It's a consequence. It's the result of 84 years of ripples expanding through time until they reach exactly you. And now you have a choice. The same choice that Gajowniczek had when he walked out of Auschwitz. The same choice that Andras Schiff had when he arrived in the United States. The same choice that Václav Havel had when he returned to Czechoslovakia. The choice to transform your survival into a mission. Because here is the truth that will change your life. You are not alive by chance. You are alive as a result of millions of decisions made by people who chose to give instead of take. People who chose to multiply instead of diminish. People who understood that their lives are investments in humanity's future. And now it's your turn to decide what kind of investment your life will be. 2025, 84 years after the exchange, the world faces crises that seem impossible to solve. Climate change, global conflicts, extreme inequality, social polarization. Millions of desperate people needing hope. What the world needs now are not more saints like Kolbe. What the world needs are people like you who understand that each individual life can create historical waves. People who understand that the exchange between Kolbe and Gajowniczek wasn't a unique, unrepeatable event. It was a model, a template, a demonstration of how a single compassionate decision can alter entire timelines. And you have just become an heir to that template. Gajowniczek's letter ended with a section he titled, "For those who come after me." If you are reading this, it said, it's because the waves created by our story have reached you. This means you have been chosen, not by God, but by history. Chosen to continue multiplying the investment that Father Kolbe made in me. Your mission now is simple. Live as if your life were an investment in humanity's future, because that is exactly what it is. Every act of kindness you practice, every person you help, every moment you choose to build instead of destroy, All of these are dividends of the investment Kolbe made 84 years ago. You carry within you the power to create waves that will expand for the next 84 years. Waves that will touch lives you will never know. Waves that will influence events you will never see. Waves that will shape a world you can only dream of. Use this power wisely. Use it with love. Use it knowing that you are not just living your own life. You are living all the future lives your life can create. Today, as you listen to this story, millions of people around the world are facing impossible situations. They are in places where hope seems to have died. They are at moments where they believe their lives don't matter. They need someone who understands what you have just understood, that a single life lived with purpose can alter the course of history. They need waves, waves of compassion, waves of courage, waves of unconditional love, waves that can only be created by people who understand they are living investments in humanity's future. They need you, not because you are special, but because you understood something special. That history is not made by extraordinary people doing impossible things. History is made by ordinary people who understood that their lives can have an extraordinary impact. People like Franciszek Gajowniczek, an ordinary sergeant who became an inherent catalyst for global change because someone saw in him the potential to create waves. People like you, an ordinary person who can become a catalyst for unimaginable change because now you know you carry within you the power to multiply historical investments. The exchange between Kolbe and Gajowniczek didn't happen 84 years ago. It's happening now. At this moment, in you, Kolbe is exchanging, again, his life for yours. Gajowniczek is passing, again, the responsibility of multiplying this investment to you. The ripples in the boundless pond have reached you. Now it's your turn to create new waves. Waves that will expand through the next 84 years. Waves that will touch people who haven't even been born yet. Waves that will create worlds you can't even imagine. One exchange, one life for another. A decision that changed the course of world history. But it wasn't really an exchange. It was a seed that grew into a forest that continues to grow, a forest that now includes you. And just as Kolbe saw in Gajowniczek a seed of potential, I see in you a seed of the future, a seed that can grow to alter the course of the next 84 years of human history. The question isn't whether you will plant this seed. The question is, what kind of forest will grow from it? The ripples in the boundless pond are waiting for you to create the next expansion. History is waiting for you to write the next chapter. The future is waiting for you to make the next decision that will echo through generations. Franciszek Gajowniczek exchanged his saved life for 43,000 lives saved. How many transformed lives can you exchange your transformed life for? The exchange continues, and now it passes through you.